We welcome you to the Bible study today. We are studying the book of Job. And so if you would, turn in your Bibles to the book of Job. We'll begin with an introduction briefly, and then we'll start into chapter 1, verse by verse, through the chapter. The book of Job, if we were to place it into a category, it might be placed into the poetic and wisdom literature section of the library. The writer of the book is unknown. One of the different suggestions offered as a possibility for the writer of the book of Job is Moses. However, no writer is specified in the book itself. What is the date? First, there's the setting of the book. The events of the book appear to be from the patriarchal age, which takes place from the creation to the giving of the law of Moses. Job may have lived in the period of Abraham. Note the similar lifespans of Job and Abraham given in the Bible, with Job living 140 years and Abraham living 175 years. In Job 42 and 16, we see the age of Job, and Genesis 25, 7-8, the age of Abraham. And so we have the setting appears to be taken during the patriarchal age or dispensation. Second, there is the date in which the book itself was written. Again, as the writer is unknown, the date of the composition of the book itself is also unknown. What about support for the book and for Job himself? The man Job is mentioned by other writers in the Bible. Ezekiel listed Job right along with Noah and Daniel as a righteous man. We see that he is identified as a historical man as much as the others, according to Ezekiel. Ezekiel 14:14 and Ezekiel 14:20. He said, even if these three men, Noah, Daniel, and Job, were in it, they would deliver only themselves by their righteousness, says the Lord God. Ezekiel 14:14. And again in chapter 14, verse 20, Noah, Daniel, and Job. And so Job is as much a historical figure as Noah and Daniel. James in the New Testament, disciple of Jesus, mentioned Job as an example of perseverance. He made the point that those who endure are blessed and that they had heard of the perseverance or patience of Job. James 5:11. The book of Job is also quoted by the Apostle Paul in the New Testament. Paul quoted from the book of Job in both his epistles to the Romans and the Corinthians. 1 Corinthians 3:19, right alongside Job 5:13. And also in Romans 11:35, a quotation from Job 41:11. And so here we see different people of the Bible identifying him as a historical figure and also quoting from the book bearing his name. What is the message of the book of Job? A righteous man named Job is tested. He experiences the loss of his possessions, his children, and his health. His wife does not support him, and his friends are silent. He experiences suffering that happens without any known cause. Job's three friends saw him experience great suffering and concluded that he must have committed some great sin. They confront him with accusations of wrongdoing. However, Job defends his innocence. Elihu, a fourth character in the book, later enters the discussion, teaching the value of the suffering, rebuking the other friends for offering no solutions, while rebuking Job for making the matter more about himself. God speaks to Job in the book. We see that he overpowers him while with his own glory and the glories of his creation. Job responds with humility before God and acknowledges his ignorance. Job maintains his integrity, and God blesses Job. There is the message of the book of Job. What is the lesson? Well, the lesson is one of perseverance, as we identified by the quotation from the disciple named James. The lesson is to be patient, trusting in God, no matter the affliction you face, and ultimately, you will be blessed by God. If we were to provide an outline for the book, we might do so in 5 major sections. And of course, these sections could be broken down further. Job is tested, 1 and 2. We see Job's 3 friends, 3 to 31. Elihu's presentation, 32 to 37. We see how the Lord speaks to Job in 38 to 41. And finally, in chapter 42, Job is blessed. Today, we'll look at Job chapter 1. So if you would, turn your Bibles and let's begin. Job chapter 1. Verses 1 to 5, we see Job and his family. There was a man in the land of Uz, whose name was Job. And that man was blameless and upright, and one who feared God and shunned evil. Here in verses 1 to 3, we see the character of Job. The writer describes him as a man who lived in the land of Uz. Job was a historical figure right along with Noah and Daniel, as we noted in the introduction in Ezekiel 14:14 and verse 20. Who's noted for his perseverance in James 5 and 11. According to Jeremiah, there were kings in the land of Uz, Jeremiah 25:20. And the land of Uz is later called Edom, and Lamentations 4 and 21. The passage describes the character of the man in 4 ways. First, he was blameless. While he was not sinless, he was above reproach. The blameless are contrasted with evildoers in Job 8 and 20, and the wicked in Job 9 and 22, while the righteous in Job 9:20 are contrasted with those wicked. Second, he was upright, and so he was marked by moral rectitude. The upright are said to be pure, James 8 and 6, and also innocent, in Job 4:7 and Job 17 and verse 8. In Psalm 37:37, he said, "Mark the blameless man and observe the upright, for the future of that man is peace." Third, he was one who feared God. He held God in reverence. Fourth, he was one who shunned evil. This may literally be translated as turned away from evil. It is also translated as depart. As he feared the Lord, he was a man of wisdom. As he departed from evil, he was a man of understanding. Job 28:28, it says, "And to the man he said, Behold, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, and to depart from evil is understanding." Solomon wrote in Proverbs 16:6, "In mercy and truth, atonement is provided for iniquity, and by the fear of the Lord, one departs from evil." The Lord repeatedly notes the unique character of Job in Job 1:8 and Job 2 and 3. Verse 2, it says, "And 7 sons and 3 daughters were born to him." And so Job had a large family of 7 sons and 3 daughters. Large family was considered a blessing. According to Solomon in Psalm 127 and verse 3, children are a heritage from the Lord. Verse 3, also his possessions were 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 female donkeys, and a very large household, so that this man was the greatest of all the people of the East. Job had a great household and great possessions. He had many sheep, camels, oxen, and donkeys, which signified his great wealth. He had a very large household. The people of his household included a large number of servants. The term household is also translated servants in Genesis 26 and 14. These servants would be needed to tend to his livestock. Job is described as being the greatest of all the people of the East. With him, all of his possessions and large number of servants, he was the greatest or the richest of the people. The term people may literally be translated as sons, Job 1 and 4. Job maintained his moral rectitude or character despite his riches. Sometimes there are temptations involved with riches. However, we see that Job maintained his trust in God. Verse 4. And his sons would go and feast in their houses, each on his appointed day, and would send and invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. The 7 sons of Job would go and feast in their houses. Apparently, each of the 7 sons had a house of their own. According to the text, they would do so each on his appointed day. It appears that the sons took turns holding a feast in their own house. They would invite their 3 sisters to come to the feast, each on each appointed day. Verse 5. So it was when the days of feasting had run their course that Job would send and sanctify them, and he would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, it may be that my sons have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. Thus Job did regularly. After the days of feasting had ended, Job would send and sanctify them. To sanctify is to set apart for holiness. Some versions read consecrate. He would get up early in the morning and offer these burnt offerings for each of them. As patriarch, Job functioned as a priest for his family, offering burnt offerings. And Job did this regularly. This was a regular practice or custom. Why did Job do so? He said to himself, thinking that it might be that his sons had sinned and cursed God in their hearts. An application today, do we as parents pray for our children? It was Job's regular custom to offer burnt offerings for the sins of his sons. This term sons is most frequently translated as sons, such as in Job 1 and 2. However, the same term can also be rendered as people and children in chapter 1 and 3 and chapter 17 and 5. And so some versions may read children here in this passage. That Job offered up burnt offerings for each of his children, the 7 sons and his 3 daughters. Job offered burnt offerings for them may indicate that the setting of the book was during the patriarchal dispensation, prior to the Mosaic dispensation and the law regarding priests. The second section of this first chapter describes how Satan visits the Lord in verses 6 to 12. Verse 6. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. And so he says that there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord. Lord in all caps represents the covenant name of God, Jehovah, or some use the term Yahweh. And so here he describes going before the presence of the Lord. The place of assembly is not specified. However, it is said to be before the Lord. Also, the meaning of the phrase, the sons of God, is not specified either. People have different ideas about what is meant by the sons of God. Some suggest that sons of God refers to angels. However, it is not specified as such. We also see here in verse 6 that Satan also came among them. This text is literally the adversary or the accuser. And so the Lord permitted Satan, the accuser, the adversary, to come to him. Again, sons of God might refer to angels. One version gives that particular interpretation. Job 1:6 and Job 38:7. This expression, sons of angels, is later found in the book of Job. Sons of God is found later in the book, where the context of that particular section does suggest angels. However, that doesn't require that the sons of God is likewise a reference to angels in every passage, such as this. So the best we can say here is that he is having this assembly with when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord. Verse 7, and the Lord said to Satan, from where do you come? So Satan answered the Lord and said, from going to and fro on the earth, and from walking back and forth on it. Here in verse 7, the Lord speaks to Satan, asking his whereabouts. He certainly did not ask for his own benefit, but perhaps for the benefit of the sons of God who were in his presence. Satan answered the Lord obscurely. We may gather that his activities and intentions were certainly not benevolent, they were malevolent. Peter may have had the description of the devil with Job in mind, the book of Job in mind, when he wrote 1 Peter 5:8-9. He said, be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. Resist him steadfast in the faith, knowing that the same sufferings are experienced by your brotherhood in the world. And so Satan was walking about, seeking someone to accuse. Verse 8. Then the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, one who fears God and shuns evil? As Satan was going to and fro on the earth and walking back and forth on it, had he considered Job? The Lord commends Job as his servant. There was none like Job on the earth, who was blameless and upright, and one who feared God and shunned evil. Verse 1. Verse 9. So Satan answered the Lord and said, does Job fear God for nothing? Satan impugned the character of Job. He attributes Job's fear of God to being selfish. He did not fear God for nothing. He personally benefited, Satan said. Job 1:2-3. While it was true that Job benefited by serving God, Job did not serve God merely for what he could gain by it in his life. Verse 10. Have you not made a hedge around him, around his household, and around all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. Satan makes the argument, why would Job not fear you, God? First, you protect Job, surrounding him with a wall of protection. The making of a hedge was used as a physical barrier for protection by men. Satan describes how God protected Job's household and how he protected everything else of Job's. Second, how God had blessed his work, and as a result, his possessions had increased in the land. Verse 11, But now stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. Satan challenges the Lord. Strike Job and all that he has, and he will curse you. Verse 12. And the Lord said to Satan, behold, all that he has is in your power. Only do not lay a hand on his person. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. The Lord permitted Satan to act against Job. He put all that Job had in the hand of Satan, in his power. However, he restricted Satan from laying a hand on his person. After gaining permission from the Lord, Satan left from his presence. Verses 13 to 22. We see Job's losses. Job lost his possessions and his children. Verses 13 to 19, we see the testing of Job. Verse 13, now there was a day when his sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. The setting was during the days of the feasting. On this particular day, the oldest brother had a feast in his house. The sons and the daughters of Job were eating and drinking wine together. So they were feasting. There's nothing about this that would require it to be a revelry or anything of that nature. Verse 14. And a messenger came to Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the donkeys feeding beside them. And so we see a messenger visited Job with some news. He said that the oxen were plowing and the donkeys were feeding or grazing beside them. These were servants who used the oxen, the plow, and watched over the donkeys. Job 1:15. We know that Job had 500 yoke of oxen and 500 female donkeys, Job 1 and 3. We also know that he had a very large household, Job 1 and 3. Verse 15. When the Sabaeans raided them and took them away, indeed they have killed the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. So here we have the first great loss. We see the loss of his oxen and donkeys. We see the loss of his servants by the Sabaeans. Verse 15. The Sabaeans attacked and took the oxen and donkeys away in the raid. They killed the servants, and the messenger emphatically claimed to be the only servant who escaped the raid. We have no reason to doubt that. He said, only I have escaped. He's the only one. And so this servant escaped with a message. The messenger brought word to Job. These Sabaeans had raided, or literally fell upon them. Verse 16. While he was still speaking, another also came and said, the fire of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them, and I alone have escaped to tell you. Here we see the second great loss. While the first messenger was still speaking, he wasn't done. A second messenger also came to Job. He said that the fire of God fell from heaven, burned up the sheep and the servants, and the fire consumed them. We know that Job had 7,000 sheep, according to verse 3. And here this messenger is said to be the only one who escaped. What was this fire of God? Well, this was the description given by the messenger. Whatever it was, this is what he thought it was, that burned up the sheep and the servants. Some have suggested that the fire might have been lightning from a storm. such as in Job 36 and verse 32. We see other occasions where God sent fire, and it's described as the fire of God, such as when Elijah the prophet prayed to God and the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt offering or sacrifice in 1 Kings 18:38. We also see how the Lord rained down brimstone and fire on Sodom and Gomorrah, Genesis 19 and 24. So all we know for certain is that the fire of God fell down upon them. Perhaps it was lightning. The point is that the possessions of Job here were burned up. We see the sheep, and we also see the servants, how that they were all consumed, with one left to escape. Verse 17, while he was still speaking, another also came and said, the Chaldeans formed 3 bands, raided the camels, and took them away. Yes, and killed the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. While the second messenger was still speaking, a third also came to Job. He said that the Chaldeans had formed 3 bands, raided the camels, and took them away. We know from verse 3 that Job had 3,000 camels. We see here that they killed the servants, and this messenger was the only one to escape. I alone have escaped to tell you, he said. Verse 18. While he was still speaking, another also came and said, your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. And so while the third messenger was still speaking, he was not yet done. A fourth messenger also came to Job. The message began with what the writer of the book wrote earlier in verse 13. Now there was a day when his sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. The news of this final messenger would be the worst that Job would receive that day, and perhaps the worst that he would ever receive. Verse 19. And suddenly a great wind came from across the wilderness and struck the 4 corners of the house, and it fell on the young people, and they are dead, and I alone have escaped to tell you. A great wind came suddenly, according to this messenger, struck the house, causing the house to collapse and fall on the young people. 4 corners of the house were struck by this great wind. And so this sturdy structure collapses. Here we see this great wind. Perhaps it was a whirlwind, such as in Job 37 and 9. In the book of Job, this same term is translated servants, young people, children, and young men. Basically, the meaning, according to Vine, of this Hebrew term is youth as compared with an older man. So here you have these young servants and young people and these children and young men. And so all these youths described here in the passage. Here in this particular verse, the young people refers to the children of Job, his sons and his daughters. Satan used various means to test Job. He used people, the evil men of the Sabaeans and the Chaldeans with their swords. He also used nature, such as the fire of God and a great wind. In verses 20 to 22, we see the patience of Job. Then Job arose, tore his robe, and shaved his head, and he fell to the ground and worshiped. Job had listened to each of the messengers. One could only imagine. After hearing the fourth messenger, learning that his sons and daughters were dead, Job stood up. He tore his robe in grief and shaved his head. Job did not charge God with wrong, according to verse 22. He fell to the ground and instead worshiped God. People, according to their customs, sometimes tore their clothes as a sign of grief. Genesis 37:29 and 34. People also cut their hair off sometimes as a sign of grief as well. Micah 1:16 and Jeremiah 7:29. Verse 21. And he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Job expresses a truth that is also said by Solomon. Ecclesiastes 5:15, as he came from his mother's womb, naked shall he return, to go as he came, and he shall take nothing from his labor, which he may carry away in his hand. He came from his mother's womb naked. He would return to his mother's womb naked. How could one return to his mother's womb? The words mother's womb in this part of the passage may be a metonymy, a figure of speech, for the dust of the ground. For example, in Genesis 3:10, Moses wrote, in the sweat of your face you shall eat bread, till you return to the ground. For out of it you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you shall return. And so, again, mother's womb may be referring to the ground or the dust of the ground of the earth. The Apostle Paul in the New Testament expressed the same truth in 1 Timothy 6:6-8. Now, godliness with contentment is great gain, for we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out. And having food and clothing, with these we shall be content. Job here in verse 21 praises God. The only reason he had life to begin with, was because God gave him his life. He was thankful for the life that he had. He was the greatest, according to the writer of the book, in the East. And that was only by the blessing of God. He said, the Lord gave and the Lord has taken away. Everything he had by God. Verse 22. In all this, Job did not sin, nor charge God with wrong. Job suffered the loss of his possessions, servants, and his children. Yet Job did not sin, nor charge God with wrong. Another version reads, blame. He didn't ascribe any blame to God. Instead of blaming God, Job worshiped God. Verse 20. What about the challenge made by the adversary, the accuser, Satan? Satan failed in his first challenge. Job regularly offered burnt offerings for his children. He said in verse 5, it may be that my sons have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. Satan made a challenge concerning Job, saying to the Lord, but stretch out. Now stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will surely curse you to his face, to your face. Job 1:11. Yet Job did not curse God. In fact, Job did not sin nor charge God with wrong. And so Job did not sin in that he did not curse God as Satan said he would, nor did Job curse God with wrong or accuse him with blame. Here we see the perseverance, the patience of Job. That brings us to the end of the first chapter. And next time, Lord willing, we'll continue with Job chapter 2. We thank you for being here today, and we encourage you to continue to study the book of Job.